This is sort of an introduction and a mini-sermon to what's going to be happening, having just closed the Scriptures, what's going to be happening probably next week, when I'd like to pick up a little more definitely on the things that make for peace, but I thought we might have a very quick kind of a mini-sermon to set the tone for. For the past few weeks, as you know, we've been raising some questions and recognizing that all life is basically trying to find a harmony and balance. And what appears to be true on one side of the coin may or may not be true on the other side of the coin, but you can't understand any side of life without understanding, in a sense, both sides. And so while we approach religion with a full understanding that one must use one's intellectual capabilities to their highest extent in order to understand man and then to understand God and the relationships, there are also times, as we talked last week, where one must just feel that which is deep inside, and recognizing that there's a validity and a portion of life which has to be understood by how we feel one with the other. We don't know why. We can't explain why. With certain people we're immediately very comfortable, and with other people it takes forever. I've been spending some time, my late night reading, just before I fall asleep, with Albert Speer's book, Spandau, The Secret Diaries. I wish I had a chance to sit down and talk at some length with Mr. Speer. You will remember he was the armaments ministry in the Third Reich under Hitler, probably the second most powerful man in many ways during that hideous time. But out of all the people who have been tried and have reflected upon what happened in Germany during the Third Reich, Albert Speer is the one who has most penetratedly looked at himself and tried to understand what happened and what caused him, a man raised as a moral human being with all kinds of spiritual backgrounds, to go so far astray. He was the only one at Nuremberg who confessed that he was guilty of what he was charged and accepted full responsibility for what he did. He was laughed at and mocked by his fellow defendants because they wanted to argue that they were under a military dictatorship and could have no other change. Albert Speer, in his memoirs and in his history of the Third Reich and in all that he has written and talked about subsequently, probed deep down inside his own mind to find out why he, as an intelligent human being, could get caught up in a system as horrendous as that of the Third Reich. We could talk last night, and it caused me a few moments of sleeplessness as I thought about it. That as he meditated upon Hitler and as he tried to understand the personality of Adolf Hitler, he said he was sort of a reverse King Midas, where everything that King Midas touched became gold, everything that Hitler touched became death and corpses. But interesting among the diaries are not only the man and what he is going through and how he seeks to maintain his sanity, but the system of Spandau itself. Four powers, as you know, the French, the German, the British, and the American, share responsibility for Spandau. And the political woes of the countries are shown in the way they treat each other, the guards and the directors of the prison as they deal with Spandau in Berlin. There is law there. There is order there. But ultimately, the law and the order breaks down with the human kindness of personal relationships. Time and time again over the 20 years that Mr. Speer spent in Spandau, you see a new director, be he British or American or Russian, coming in and suddenly cracking the whip and saying all of the laws that are supposed to be on the books will be enforced. There will be no talking with the guards and the prisoners. The prisoners will not talk with each other, but will walk when they have their exercise and a particular path that will keep them separated one from another. There will be shakedowns of the cells. And for a few weeks after this new guard or particular director would arrive, things would become hellish. Because there was a limitation that was followed in terms of the legal to the point. And then the warmth of the human spirit began to work through, and the guards began to smile, and even the directors overlooked minor infractions. And life returned, as Speer said, to the normalness of prison life. And conversations continued, and people talked together. I was thinking upon that as I was trying to understand some of the things that lead towards peace, and one of the things that we're fighting in American society today is a hue and cry for what is commonly called law and order. I think it is based on a fundamentally poor understanding of what law is. And therefore, I would like to, is not in a way to say that there's an anti-legalism or that we ought not to have law or that we ought to throw law out, but as a means of looking at the other side of the coin, just raise a couple of questions. For example, if I were to tell you that there was a law that is now being proposed that said, you may have one glass of wine. You may not have more than one glass of wine. You may not have a bottle of wine. You may not grow your own wine. You may not buy wine. You may not sell wine, but you can have one glass of wine. How would you respond to that law? Idiotic, you would say. What kind of a law is it that says I can have a glass of wine, but I can't legally buy it, sell it, or grow it? I can't make my own, and I can't have more than that single glass. Okay? Now, everybody would rise up and say, hey, what's going on here? Something is drastically wrong. And yet, when you look at the legal process, this is precisely what we're saying about marijuana. You can have a certain amount of marijuana, according to the proponents of this law. You can't buy it, you can't sell it, and you can't grow it, and you can't have more than that, but you can have a certain amount. Now, where is the understanding of human endeavor or the understanding of life in that particular ridiculous law? What's the purpose of it? Except to rid the jails of people that are now considered to be criminals. Isn't there a better way to approach it? And does that answer the problem? The answer is obviously no, but we still hear it being proposed all around. As a matter of fact, what law does is it shows that peace is not there. It does not create peace. Well, that's a very simple first point, and I hope you won't let it pass by too quickly. Law shows us when peace has fallen apart. It does not create peace. It never has, and it never will. When you look at what is called legalism in the Bible, the legalism of the Bible is a transference of the legal patterns of law towards trying to establish what makes a man righteous, rather than a recognition of what the Bible means by law. That is, that the law helps us to understand when we have broken it, that we have broken fellowship, and peace is no longer there. This is a fundamental difference, I think, in terms of the understanding of the Christian doctrine of man and the understanding of man proposed by many of those in society today. You cannot transform a man by making new laws. And consequently, our laws spell out not what we ought to be doing, but spell out when things have gone astray. Peace comes, therefore, not by the transference of laws, but by a number of other things. I think in the first place we ought to recognize that we are dealing with the concept of humanity. Peace comes when the human spirit and the human being recognizes and can carry through fully, completely, and 100% his own destiny. Noel Dean and I were talking last night about some of the problems in the Roman Catholic Church, particularly with the nuns. I made the point that the Roman Catholic Church was learning one of the saddest and yet oldest lessons of history. You either put a complete, tyrannical, tight rein on individuals, or you give them their freedom. You cannot, in any manner, shape, or form, give them limited freedom. Now, don't let that one pass by. You can hold tightly the old nun in the full habit, working out of the nunnery, coming out, doing her good work, moving back in under the strict control of the heads in the church and all kinds of things, and knowing exactly what she was required to do and allowing only her thoughts to be sort of free, and you can deal with that and you can live with that. Or you can live with the freedom that says, I am a free individual and have the moral responsibility to carry through. But what has happened in society is we have said you are free, but not totally free. And that is an intolerable situation, because when you don't know what its rules are and you don't know how you're going to be judged, you have no basis for action. Herr Speer tells an interesting story. One of the requirements of the Spandau was that whenever, once a year, for a half hour, his wife was permitted her yearly visit, they were to sit measured distance apart with at least 2 of the 4 directors of the prison, representing the French, the English, the British, the Russians, or the Americans present. They were not to touch. They could not shake hands. They were not to embrace. And whenever an officer entered the room, regardless of when, the prisoners were to stand and salute and greet them. They were permitted no language other than German, which I thought was interesting. Mr. Spear speaks French, he speaks English, speaks Russian, but he could not speak any of these languages. It was all to be done in German. 16 years into this thing, where he has for 16 years visited and done the same thing, the new American director arrives. During the course of his half-hour interview, the American director moved in, and Herr Speer stood, partly as he had done for 16 years, saluted and said to him, "Guten Morgen, Herr Director," and sat down and continued the conversation. Because he did not do what the new director wanted, stand at full military attention and wait to be dismissed, he was put on 1 week of solitary confinement with no books, no newspapers, no contact with anybody else. When Mr. Spear said, "But your honored sir, I have done this way for 16 years, the man said, "This is a military prison and you will do what I'm telling you." Now, Mr. Spear's problem was not that he didn't know didn't want to respond correctly. He had living in an area in which the rules were changing, and he didn't know that they had been changed. Think about what you do with your kids. We struggle mightily with David. He's a little bit too rascality, about him. He's too much rambunctious. He's too much reaching out. He's got too much freedom. And I struggle with it because what has happened is that consciously I've tried to give David freedom, and then I'm unhappy when he doesn't respond the way I want him to. I want to be able to pull the string back and say, "Oh, you're going too far." And there are times when I think a parent has to, but I also recognize that very often the very consciousness of instilling in him what it means that I have to recognize that his freedom grows out and expands and stretches. There's a need for an understanding of humanity in the Christian sense of the word, of the depth and the worth of each individual, of the ability to relate to one another, of the ability to look each other in the eye and to see yourself, the ability to do, which is what that is, unto others as you would have them do unto you. One does not kill friends easily. One has to go through all kinds of things to kill true friends easily. I know the statistics show that you're a better chance to be killed by a mate or by a close associate, but I'm talking about friends. One does not kill equals easily. One responds to lesser beings, Untermenschen, subhumans, those who are dirty, those who are rotten, those who are socially acceptable. One does not deal with equals in a humanity easily, poorly. And when you look at the Christian doctrine where we all stand before God the same distance before Him, and we all recognize that under God we have no special place, that each one of us is struggling with our destiny, and that every other person stands just as close and is just as much as part of God as we are, we change our lifestyle if we are honest, because we can only say at that particular point, their God am I. And I must treat as toughly and openly that person as I would be treated. It ain't easy. It's difficult to love the unlovely, as it's been said. It's difficult to forgive the unforgivable. It's difficult to reach out and to share with those who really don't want to have a sharing. It's difficult to live down the prejudices and the hatreds that you've been raised with. It's difficult to overcome the upheavals of a tragic event in life that so instills in us a fear and a bitterness that we can't reach out with the wholeness of the Spirit ever again. But it is precisely at that point that the church and the message of God and the love of God, as we see through the teachings of Jesus, radiates out. And we find that we, under God, can do what we by ourselves cannot do: love one another. And if there's any reason that a church like this exists, it's because the power of God can radiate out from it to all around. Not going too much on that, John. You were supposed to stop me. I'll leave points 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 for next week. We'll pick up on the idea of what makes for peace. For it's not only an understanding of what it means to be a human being under God, but it's an understanding of God in life. It's not only an understanding of God in life, but it's a sharing and a participation in life. It's not only a sharing and a participation in life, but it's a recognition that things that we don't have cause us tremendous problems, but the things that we do have never give us peace. That's one I want to explore. That is a tremendous statement that if we could ever learn it, about 90% of us would make drastic changes in our lives. And maybe I ought to be more honest and say 100%. That things which we lack cause us tremendous unhappiness, but never have anybody found peace by the collection of things. The more things you get and the more you spread out may be a reflection of yourself, but it does not create peace. If it doesn't, what does? Come back next week for episode 2, and we will continue that particular theme. I would invite each of you, as we join following the hymn downstairs, to participate in the breakfast. I'm going to ask Noel Dean to come to the back of the church when I leave to welcome people. Introduce yourself, even if you've met him once today. He's been memorizing your pictures and names, but some of you are far better looking in person than the pictures, and he ought to be able to put that together. And introduce yourself as you're coming on out. Come on downstairs and join in fellowship. After the singing of the hymn, I will give not only the benediction, but the prayer for the meal which is to follow, and therefore you don't have to wait, but you can dig right in. The whole point is that peace comes when the unity of mind, body, and spirit, when the community in which we live understands itself and is willing to allow other people to have what it means to be their self. May the power of God instill in each of us a self-regard that enables us to love ourselves as we seek to love others.